Welcome to the Sandersonian Institute of Cosmere Studies, where there's always another secret.
We're back! Welcome to episode 16 of the Sandersonian Institute of Cosmere Studies. Today is October 15th, 2018, and in this episode we are returning to Scadrial to see what's been going on there after a 300-year break. I am Bill, and I am joined as always by my rough riding co-hosts, Amy and Jordan.
Hello, hello.
Well, howdy there, folks.
Howdy, howdy.
Howdy, howdy, howdy.
Guys, I was going to be dressed festively, but
For those of you who are audio-only listeners, Bill is trying to put on his cowboy hat, but it turns out wearing headsets was not part of the original design of said hat.
It's like they didn't have headsets back in the Old West or something.
Like savages.
I know.
Anyway, for those of you who do listen to the podcast recordings or are watching the videos on YouTube, we would like to remind you that it is possible for our listeners to interact with us live via chat as we record each episode live at www.twitch.tv/innkeeperstable. We record episodes of the Sandersonian Institute of Cosmere Studies every other Monday night, starting at 7:30 p.m. Pacific Time, 10:30 p.m. Eastern. So please join us, take an active part of the discussion, let us know what you're thinking, help direct the discussion in the direction that you want it to go. Excuse me. Now, one other thing that's exciting, it is fortuitous that today is episode 16 because we have also hit our first Patreon goal at $16 per episode, which means that we are starting today our monthly giveaways for our listeners. So, I'm wondering, though, what sorts of prizes might we be giving away?
Oh, well, it's really interesting that you asked that question, Bill, because I just so happen to have just two conveniently just placed prizes.
How perfect!
You see these two paired tin and pewter coasters that are reversed if you're looking at the stream directly, so don't focus on that. But yes, they're coasters. They were made via someone on Etsy whose name I looked at before we started this. Beefy by Design made these. They're laser burned into the wood, and they have the allomantic symbols for tin and pewter. And so that's going to be the prize. But I don't know. I mean, but who could win these things?
I don't know.
Well, actually, just about anybody could win these things as long as they go to our social media accounts. After the stream, we're going to post a picture of them. And to enter the giveaway, all you need to do is tag somebody, a friend, a family member, somebody who would appreciate a Mistborn coaster. And we will enter you into the drawing and send you the paired set, one for you and one for them.
There is one unfortunate limitation. You have to live in the United States. Sorry, guys, but it's expensive to ship internationally, and
it is incredibly expensive.
We really
there might be
in the future, maybe, but for now,
there might be exceptions. But for the majority of our giveaways, unfortunately, it is going to be limited to a U.S. only audience.
Yeah, unless we do something like digital or something, then that wouldn't be a big deal. But with shipping costs,
there are a few different possibilities. Yeah, and sometimes we may feel generous and splurge, but right now that's sort of outside the financial
budget.
Yes, exactly. But for those of you who are in the U.S., we would love to have you enter. So we're going to have that up on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. You can enter once for each. And just tag somebody who would appreciate a Mistborn coaster. And when you win, we'll send those both to you, and you can share them yourself. So That's cool. I love that we're hitting our patron goals.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's sort of a new development, and it's a fun
Mhm.
development.
It is a fun development because it means people are listening, and we like having people listen.
That is true. That's categorically true.
So yeah, thanks to our patrons and to our listeners and viewers
Followers
and
everything.
followers, and just thank you, all of you, because y'all are just amazing, and we love having you with us. So now, as a reminder to those of you who may just be tuning into the podcast after, first off, we've got 15 episodes before this one, so feel free to go check those out as well. But just to clarify, the way we're handling episodes right now is we're devoting an episode or 2 or 4 to discussing each book's storyline, as well as basically how it fits into the general Cosmere, some of the characters, the plot, etc. So once we've made our way through all of the current books that Brandon's published, we're going to start devoting episodes to some of the more broad concepts that span the various series, and we're going to talk about what we're calling our aluminum foil hat theories. The origin of that term is actually from this book that we're discussing today. And we're going to talk about our own theories. We're going to talk about theories that have been submitted by you. So if you've got an idea about the Cosmere that you'd like us to talk about during the show, be sure to email it to us at cosmerestudies@gmail.com.
And to that point, if we reach our next goal, which is $32 per episode, because 16 is indeed an important number.
It's true.
That's when we actually, instead of just trying to pepper emails into our episodes, we're going to devote one episode per quarter as just a bonus episode, so it wouldn't mess with our normal covering other stuff. Bonus episode that's nothing but your emails. So,
Yep.
If you want to, if that's what you're looking for, just consider, throwing a buck or two our way, and we can get that started.
Absolutely. All right, so guys, we're back on Scadrial.
Yay!
The best
I am
place in the
excited.
world, Cosmere.
Now,
You don't want to live there, though.
Before we go any further, though, we do want to give a warning to our listeners. There are definitely going to be spoilers here for the first Mistborn trilogy. So that's the Final Empire, the Well of Ascension, and the Hero of Ages. Just because we can't do this without having spoilers, it's just sort of integral.
Mm-hmm.
But honestly, if you haven't read the original Mistborn trilogy yet, then what are you doing here? Go read it. It's incredible. It's amazing, and you need to read it. So, especially before diving into Era 2. Era 2 is great. You need Era 1 first.
Yep.
That does make sense. Checks out.
It's true. Okay, so first I want to talk a little bit. This is one of my favorite things. I like talking about the meta of the books. So outside of the story and how the different books came to be. And this one's kind of a fun story. So basically what happened is Brandon was writing he was finishing up The Wheel of Time for Robert Jordan after he passed away. And he was originally planning to write a series of short stories on Scadrial between Era 1 and what he was calling at that time Era 2, which is a 1980s sort of setting with that level of technology. And so he was thinking of writing just a bunch of different short stories across, just sort of exploring how Allomancy and Feruchemy would work in these different settings, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so it ended up growing. He started writing this short story, and it grew into a full-size novel. And it was still supposed to be a standalone. And then, of course, it ended up growing, and now it's one of 4 books in this setting because Brandon doesn't do halfway.
Yeah, he's a man of no half measures, that's for sure.
Nope.
But yeah, so the thing I love about this between I think it was September and December of 2010. So this is when he was between publishing the second book of The Wheel of Time that he wrote and the final one. He decided he needed to take some time off. And he said, I'm taking time off from big projects. And so he did a few creative writing exercises and didn't even intend to publish this. This was just sort of a time filler to clear his head before finishing the last book in The Wheel of Time. So he took the time off, from major projects to do some what he called writing exercises. Those exercises ended up being I Hate Dragons, which is a short story that is entirely written in dialogue and is hilarious. So if you want to go look that up, that's great. Alloy of Law, and Steelheart. So, just a few minor projects.
Yeah, no big deal.
The man is a machine.
Prolific. Very prolific. But we love the result.
And we're so glad. Oh, gosh. So I love it because, when you're taking a break, Brandon's vacation gives us more books. I say let the man take as much vacation as he needs because holy cow. And it was funny because people were complaining that he was taking time out from writing the next Stormlight book. And he's just like, no. This isn't taking away from the Stormlight book. This is so that I can write the next Stormlight book.
Mm-hmm.
And so...
How is that his creative exercises,
Well, I could see it as being it's a different flavor of book and different characters and different setting, and so he can get his head out of that mindset and do a different one. Because I've found when I'm doing different cosplay projects, I'm sort of going, I am sick and tired of sewing. I'm sick and tired of it. I just want to do something else. And so I'll do a different kind of project, whether it's foam or 3D printing or PVC pipe or whatever. And then I'm like, okay, I want to sew again. And now I can sew, and I'm not so frustrated by it. And I mean, he's writing, but they're different flavors of writing, kind of.
So, little grandmother, so like the wind. No, so the other thing that's interesting is he actually wrote a different short story, started a different short story in this same time period that just didn't work. Apparently, it starred all of our favorite characters who are still around after.
Oh, really?
And he said it just didn't work at all.
Aww,
and so he came up with a different idea with a completely different cast of characters, and suddenly it was just like, it just worked, and it felt right from the very beginning. And now we have Wax and Wade, and
Mercy and Stereo, and everybody.
Mm-hmm.
It's an amazing. For one, the dialogue in this book series is utterly incredible.
Mm-hmm. They very much have like the straight man and what's the other and I can't remember the term, but like what with Wax and Wayne, how like they have the guy who's making jokes all the time and then the person who's kind of having the jokes
straight man
stuff. I kept thinking the other guy had a term other to go with the straight man, but
I can't remember.
I guess not. Anyway,
Cooker
but it feels like Wax is definitely the straight man.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
He is, but I love that he still gets in on it, though.
Oh, yeah, I mean, he's very much a lot more straight-laced, but he still makes plenty of snarky comments and other things.
He's got such dry humor. And
I can't remember the specific one, but there's one where they were arguing, and then he's just like, and besides, that wasn't even that good of a hat, or, just something like that, where he's just at the end of trying to rationalize with what is clearly a crazy person, he's then dives in with it.
And brilliant. Not just crazy. Like, Wayne dances on the line between genius and madness.
I know. I mean, you look at how he does accents and things like that and analyzing them that way and being able to pick them up and just, like, recreate them and, like, convince people that, yeah, I am this person or I am totally from the same area as you and just toying with people. Oh my goodness!
And on top of it,
good.
It's something that that Wax notices and says about him is just the fact he's like, does he even know what he's doing?
It just comes naturally to him.
He just does it.
Okay, I want to dive. I do want to talk about Wayne and Wax and the characters specifically, but first I do want to take a look at this setting because it really is. It's something you don't see a lot, unfortunately, because in so many fantasy novels, especially, you have these worlds that have existed for thousands of years, and technology has stagnated. It is, it's swords and sorcery from 5,000 years ago to 10,000 years in the future. It's just all, it's all a very medieval setting.
Well, and that was the story of the previous book series, because that was what the Lord Ruler was doing.
So it was an interesting look into it.
And they did mention that he stagnated on purpose.
Yeah. So there was a reason that it was stagnant on Scadrial, but now they've gotten rid of that reason, and so Brandon says, okay, how can we play with this magic system as technology progresses? How will the magic system affect technology progressing? They did something very similar in Avatar: The Last Airbender, where they had the Earth Kingdom, where with the shoots, and the Earthbenders would send things up, and they would push things up to the top of the city, and then there was a delivery system of slides that would go down based on gravity. And it was just this mundane use of magic. Yeah. And that's just sort of how it works in Scadrial as well, because as society progresses, they find new uses for these abilities they have.
And then in Korra, the second era of Avatar, they have more steampunk and more industrial revolution type sources. Like they have the firebenders who can do electricity, do lightning. They're doing that for electricity, and I'm like, that would be a horrible job to just do that all day.
And so society progresses around the magic, and that is something that Brandon likes to look at, is what is the long-term impact of this change that I'm introducing?
Yeah, how would society work with it?
And we're back. So sorry about the technical difficulties. Computers crash, the world continues to rotate, and we're back, and we're talking about it, so life goes on. Because, as we were talking about, technology progresses, so does the world, but it also regresses. Anyway.
Hey, look. At any point, it's the 16th episode, and in celebration of past technical difficulties, we have some on the most important number of episode.
Actually, this event with computer crashing and that sort of thing makes me excited for the 1980s era Mistborn books, because who knows?
Dial-up. Oh my goodness. Or that's even pre-dial-up.
Yeah, who knows what's going on. They're going to do some shenanigans with copper mines. Anyway, but
okay, so
yeah.
As you know, so the world has progressed. I'd love to talk about just sort of how the world has changed from the end of the world in the original trilogy.
Yep.
And now, because basically what happened is Sazed picks up the powers of preservation and ruin, and he does a bunch of stuff. He fixes things that have been broken for 1,000 years. Because suddenly you have green plants and flowers and animals. And
I love that they refer to the previous world as the world of Ash. It's just, as these things pass into legend, they tend to get these awesome names.
Oh, I mean, you look at some of our characters from the original trilogy.
Oh, my goodness.
Spook, of all things, becomes the Lord Mistborn.
I kept thinking it was Elend. I was like, no, it's not Elend.
No, he's the last emperor.
The last emperor.
But I kept having to make my head flip and go, no, it's not him. It's Spook.
Yeah, and I think they refer to the Lord Ruler as the Sliver or something like that.
The Sliver, yeah.
Is that what it is? Okay.
I think I could be remembering it wrong.
My favorite one, though, is they call Breeze the Counselor of Gods.
Where was he mentioned? I don't remember when he's mentioned.
At one point, Tiam is talking to Waxilium about his ancestor. Because remember, Waxilium is Eladria, which was Breeze's surname.
That's right.
And they talk about his ancestor, the Counselor of Gods.
Oh,
it was just
that's
like,
right.
Can you imagine Breeze hearing himself referred to as the Counselor of Gods?
The thing is,
that man didn't have a big enough head.
But the thing of it is, he really was. Because if you think about it, who did he give advice to? If you're going through their iconography, he gave advice to the Survivor, the Ascendant Warrior, the Last Emperor, Harmony himself, and Lord Mistborn. Like, the guy has some incredible skins historically.
Yep.
Mhm.
But the thing is, we have seen him in, how it actually happened. It's just like,
Yeah, we know he's a horrible lout.
or he wants to be. He kind of wants to be. That's the thing.
But he's too nice of a guy, so
Yeah.
he does good things anyway.
Kelsier turned out to make them into good men. That's what he and Clubs cursed right before
Yep.
Clubs died. And it's like, what happened to us? We used to be thieves. It's Kelsier's fault. It is. It's all his fault.
It is Kelsier's fault.
And now we have to care about things.
I love it. I mean, because it's really cool seeing, and I love it doing it in this order rather than, reading these books and then having the original trilogy be a prequel.
Mm-hmm.
Because what happens is you're looking back and you're seeing your friends that you've grown to love, and you're like, oh, this is how they remembered, and just.
And it's interesting how it changes how the characters feel to these people in the future and how they had an effect on society. Because something that stood out to me was Marasi. Dang it, Bill, now you have it stuck in my head.
I say Marasi.
I say Marasi.
I'm now combining things, so it doesn't matter. Anyway.
We know who you're talking about.
But Marasi, she talks about how she's not comfortable in trousers, but she talks about how the Ascendant Warrior was like this pinnacle of femininity because she was comfortable like in no matter what the situation was, and we all laugh and we're just like, Vin, comfortable.
No, she was not feminine.
Yeah, but at the same time, it also makes
she could be though.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, it just took. It was not a natural thing for her at the beginning. She had to learn to be.
But the other thing that makes it make so much sense, as far as what they, because you would think with Vin being this big lore character for them, that a lot of gender, not roles, but
stereotypes.
Yeah, stereotypes and stuff would go away, but they know about her past, her, how she infiltrated as, Lady Valette. And the other thing is the interpretation of those events were left to the people who survived. And one of those people who survived was also Eladrian, Alrienne, who is so girly, so
fluffy.
pink.
She's fluffy.
She's fluffy.
What is that pink thing? Yeah.
What is that pink thing that went by?
And so I could see her being a big influencer. And same with what was her name in the third book? Spooks. The girl.
Oh, I forget her name.
Oh, I don't remember her name either. That's terrible.
But she was rather feminine as well. And so a lot of what we would sit there and think, oh, Vin would have broken down these barriers. Well, she did, because this is actually a fairly, while there are gender differences, there doesn't seem to be, they don't need suffrage or anything like that.
It's a lot less strict on the women, and the women can do a lot more if they want to. Because, I mean, it's in the second book that Marasi becomes a constable or the equivalent. And so, I mean, that would not have been the case in the equivalent of our time frame.
Yeah. Well,
in our worlds, I mean, that would have been like, you want to do what? No, you don't have the brain capacity for it. Versus here, women do go to university.
She's not the first. She's not breaking any gender barriers herself, because there are others. But it's more of a societal thing rather than a gender thing. Because we were talking about trousers, for example. Leslie and
Renette
are perfectly comfortable in trousers.
Yeah.
And they don't think anything of it. And nobody really thinks anything of it.
And I think it's for Marasi, it's not that the trousers are more uncomfortable, it's because she feels more exposed. Because it's a whole clothing expectation on how much you show. And I mean, when you're wearing pants, you can see your legs, versus when you're wearing a skirt, it's just one shape.
Interesting.
Yeah. And then the other thing that I found interesting as far as how things have infiltrated society from the lore is they refer to Breeze as the counselor of the gods, and this was something we brought up a bit in the pre-show, was the zinc counselors. And as we were discussing in the pre-show about what, it's an offhand thing, But it makes perfect sense that you know, if you're looking to analyze yourself through like a psychiatrist or something like that, a soother would be quite good at something like that, because they could help you process your emotions by pushing out the emotions so you can just talk it through.
And be analytical and not let trauma affect you. Like if you had a traumatic experience, they would let you work through it logically before you let the trauma and that emotion.
Something like that would have been so, like, people hated it with Breeze, but because Breeze was the counselor of the gods, I think that's taken a lot of the
stigma away.
Yeah, the stigma away.
Only to a certain degree, yes.
Yeah, to a certain degree.
Because remember, there's a line about how there was a political candidate.
The politicians, that's right.
Because he was a copper mind and couldn't be, not a copper cloud and couldn't be.
So the difference here, though, is people still don't want to be unwillingly manipulated. Like, that's not something, no one wants that. But now I think, like, this is obviously, this not talked about in the book, but I suppose that because of Breeze and his standing in this society, he was able to sort of push some of his ideas of soothing and manipulation and show people that this isn't all bad guys. Like, you know, because we saw him go through camps and soothe away Ellen's, you know, anxiety and help, you know, people who should be stressed to be more conversational so that they'll process things.
They'll relax.
It's more than that, though, because the other thing that we learned about Breeze is he had, you know, he couldn't actually read magically people's emotions, but he had insight because he understood emotions so well. Which, again, that's the kind of skill you want in a counselor, in a psychiatrist, in a therapist.
Amazing how similar being a hustler is to being a psychiatrist.
I'm not touching that with a 10-foot pole.
It's just the end goal that changes quite a bit.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's the ability to read people. Okay, can I talk about one of my favorite developments over the course of 300 years?
That being?
High Imperial.
I burst out laughing when I read it. I was like, what is High Imperial? And then she started reading it, and I was like, oh, I'd forgotten about Wuzzing of the Wear. And I'm like, oh, it's back.
It was one of those things. It was, oh, Spook, you did this. And then you stopped, oh, Brandon.
You did it.
Because he had friends and beta readers and stuff who it drove crazy.
I
do one of them. And you could just see him saying, I'm going to put this in because Spook is the Lord Mistborn, and he gets to do what he wants, and I'm going to make him want this. Because it really does make sense. That's the funny thing.
Mm-hmm.
I would argue it still doesn't make sense, just because no one else knows how to speak it.
But that's the thing.
I could see it being that Spook didn't really encourage it, but people found out that he did that as a youth, and so they're like, "Oh, so we have to emulate him," and so they made so.
If I had to retcon why it makes sense personally, the easiest explanation would be, where was he from? Wasn't it the Eastern Dominances?
Something like that, yeah.
And so I would just say, for whatever reason, more people survived in the Eastern Dominance than did elsewhere, to where there were enough people that it made sense that it could do it. But it's still, there's not enough people. It doesn't make sense to me. It makes sense in the sense, if you want to try and make a comparison to why French became the language of the royal court in not ancient Britain, but
medieval.
Yeah, medievalish Britain when Charlemagne came over. But
there were a lot of them. The royalty grew up in France, and so it was
and so that
spoken language.
To me that it makes sense because that's a whole class of people forcing it upon them. There isn't the rest of the class. That said, as much as it bothers me that it doesn't make sense, it's literally very cute. And even though I hate High Imperial.
Oh, I hate the street slang, but I love that Brandon did this.
It's just fun.
It cracked me up.
It's one of those things I'll allow it, even though it hurts me on so many levels, because it makes Brandon happy, and it doesn't hurt me too much.
Oh gosh.
I just
gotta get
never
the
know
little
what
things.
goes on the moment he says it. Anytime they open it up, their mouth, and they start talking like that, no clue.
Does that? I don't think it happens too much in
No,
Era 2, does
no,
it?
it doesn't. It's one of those things. Like when it showed up, I'm like, no, it was supposed to die.
It
But the
can't
thing
die.
is, you put spook in power.
It's
It's
true.
gonna happen. So
As-
he did drop it in the end of Era 1.
Yeah, well,
But he dropped it at the end of Era 1 because people didn't understand him and
And
they
he-
teased him about it.
Whereas
Well,
when
now he's the ultimate leader. And so
yeah,
he's
Lord
like,
Mistborn, so he
who's
considers-
laughing now?
Yeah. Guess what, guys? I can do all the things.
I don't know.
It's a very spook thing to do.
Mm-hmm.
And so, the other thing that's really interesting is that, this is 300 years is admittedly a long time,
Mm-hmm.
but comparatively, over the course of several generations, it's not that long. It's only a few generations, right?
Yeah, but that's still about the same difference. Like,
Let me make my point.
okay,
So the thing is, this is 300 years, and there's already huge religious splits. 300 years after the basis of these religions. Because the main basis of the religions, you have survivorism, you have the path, you have sliverism. All of these are based on the events of the original Mistborn trilogy that happened only 300 years prior. And yet, it still makes sense that these religious schisms would happen because that's just the way society works. That's how people are.
well, and it especially makes sense in a world where Sazed is God, and religion's sort of something he's passionate about, and he's in particular passionate about all religions. He would let those things grow organically because those religions growing organically were the process by which he was able to fix everything.
To the point where one of the main commandments in the religion that actually worships Sazed is to study these other religions that he wrote down in the Words of Founding and pull the positive aspects from each of them. And I do find it very amusing and very Sazed that another of the commandments is don't waste time worshiping me. Because Sazed is that kind of, he's very unassuming, and being that sort of center of attention makes him incredibly uncomfortable.
And yet here he is, the Almighty.
But that's the other reason it makes sense is Sazed knows on a very intellectual level that he is a repository and font of knowledge unlike anything else Scadrial has ever seen, actually. Because not only does he have the entire knowledge of the Synod, who, did that over the course of how many generations, he also is tapping into the powers of 1/8 of Adonalsium itself. And yes, you heard me in my head correct the fact that 2/16 reduces. Come on, man. But, no, and so he is the wisest thing on Scadrial. But he also knows he's not actually a god. He's a guy who
He's an ascended mortal.
Yeah, who happened upon this power, and so he knows, in the truest sense of the word, he probably shouldn't be worshipped. And it's just, but he knows he will be because of the power and wisdom he holds. And he's a much more worthy thing to worship than heavens, Kelsier and the Lord Ruler.
Yep.
Talk about poor. The other two religions have very poor role models.
Well, and so it's interesting. He just sort of, for the tenets of this religion that he knows is going to pop up and is centered around him, he basically expresses his own personal moral code. All truth is important.
Yeah.
Do not seek lust without commitment. That's interesting coming from a eunuch. That was just something that was important enough for him to make a commandment. See strength in all flaws. Give more than you take. Essentially, do more good than harm. Like, just make a net positive. That's what he's looking for.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, you are going to make mistakes. You're going to hurt people. It's how humans work, unfortunately. You're going to make mistakes that do hurt people.
Mm-hmm.
Put more positive in than the negative that you do.
He knows better than anyone the fact that everyone is part ruin and part preservation.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And of course, meditate for 15 minutes a day with an earring in, because, dude, how brilliant is that?
I can talk to you if I really have to.
And there are some great moments in this book where he does that.
Yeah.
I love how bemused he is as a god.
Yeah.
He really is. And he's intrigued. Partly because he actually gets to look in other people's heads when they're spiked.
Mm-hmm.
Because preservation can speak to people's minds, or no, can hear people's thoughts, and ruin can speak to people's minds. And he has both of them. Mm-hmm. So he actually is able to have both sides of the conversation, which neither nice. Preservation nor ruin had in the original trilogy.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. It gives him incredible insight to put himself into his followers' shoes.
Mm-hmm.
Which, I'm sorry, this is a weird segue, but speaking of putting yourself in other people's shoes, Wayne's ability to come up with D&D characters for the purposes of imitating people is amazing.
D&D characters?
That's what he totally does that, because when you go into his head when he's imitating someone, he makes
backstory.
Yeah,
he makes backstory for it,
and he doesn't say, "I'm acting as this person." He's like, "I am this person." He gets into the role
when he's the grandma or whatever, and he's like, "No, I'm my grandson," and whatever else. He starts like making all this backstory for it, and is totally like.
I actually had an interesting thought about this like a couple days ago. Essentially, I feel like Wayne is kind of the prototype for Stephen Leeds. From Legion.
Oh.
I could see that.
Because essentially what he does is he creates these fully fleshed out characters. Now, Wayne steps into the role and Stephen Leeds pushes out the role. Mm-hmm. But essentially it's a very similar concept.
It's all about pushes and pulls.
And so I feel like, Wayne may have been sort of Brandon's testing ground for the character.
Or prototype or whatever, yeah.
So,
but the thing that is interesting about it is he knows the devil is in the details, and his ear for accents is incredible.
It's insane.
Well, and the fact that he distinguishes, they said an accent's a combination of where you grew up and what your parents did, basically, and so he throws in, which makes sense if you think about it. If you sort of think about where you grew up is how you talk and your parents are sort of what you say, or vice versa. I can't decide which is more true, but it's interesting where he's just like, oh, this is an 8th octant accent from this area, but they've been pushed out because of these economic forces, and so this accent's starting to go away, and that is a thing. Like and it's just all these small little details. It's just, once again,
and he even notices it with Wax when he's been like partway through the book. He's like, oh, he's starting to lose his, I don't remember, his accent his rough
accent.
Yeah, he's talking more like the people here. Like he even notices that it affects people as they move to different places and are there.
Yep, I love it.
It's such a good detail, and it's much like a Team Fortress 2 character. He understands the importance of a hat.
And the thing is, giving this skill to a character like Wayne makes so much fun.
It makes the things they're able to pull off possible, because Wayne can totally step in and do this, and then assume multiple roles and get help to come by making them think that he's this person or that person or
it ties
it's crazy.
It ties perfectly with his allomantic ability of the speed bubble.
Because
when Brandon mentioned what the new power was. We first found out about it in when he published the Allomantic table,
Right.
which you can sort of see in the background here, because it was the first time we saw 16, and we found out, oh, okay, so this is what these other two metals we didn't know about do. They do the speed bubbles. Okay, we didn't know the mechanics of it, and we were all trying to figure out, okay, what do they do for battle? I didn't expect it to turn into Brandon being like, talking's a free action, go.
Yeah, it lets them plan. It gives him It gives Wayne a chance to change his outfits. That's the
crazy. Yeah.
And when he's like, okay, it's time to cough now, because it covers up the little highly sped up conversation and everything. It's just
And the other thing that's cool about it is just the fact it's another little detail you can do to show what a well-oiled duo Wax and Wayne are, is the fact that they do it, like, they don't have to talk about it, they just do it. And I think the best one was when the bomb goes off in his office and Maricy's in the bubble with them, and they're casually trying to figure out, okay, how do we get out of this? And suddenly, you see how they survived so much was mostly because, like, less to do with how good of fighters they are, and more the fact that they can sit there and do a quick planning session in the middle of a fight and react to changes. And Maricy's sitting there watching the explosion slow
and closer,
and she's just
closer.
Like,
guys,
There's fire. There's fire. It's coming closer. And they're like, no, we should do this instead. They're like planning, and she's freaking out and trying not to.
You guys are being horribly casual about this.
I also love that, because they've been together for so long, they have terminology, like bat on the wall.
Yeah.
He says, and then he takes a bar and he pins Wayne's dueling stat
to the bottom of the table, yeah.
To the table. Just by pushing on it, because he has a metal bar and it's just pinning it against the table.
So they can keep him from getting confiscated, right?
Yeah.
It's one of those, it's just like Zanzibar. Just sort of, just this reference to something that happened. It's a noodle incident where, you reference something that happened by its name, by a location that it happened, and the entire audience is like, it's like, what? Wait,
it's like, what?
There's a whole other story here. What? Go back to that.
Like with Hawkeye and Black Widow and Marvel, the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and you're like,
just like Budapest.
What happened? What happened in Budapest? I want to know what happened in Budapest now.
You remember Budapest different than I do.
I do. Yep.
It's so fun. I love characters that have that kind of
repertoire in between it.
They've worked together for so long that they can speak just in references only.
And the reason that works is that all of us have that. We all have that person where you don't need to say a word because your brains go to the same spot because of your shared experiences. And those are, in fact, some of the funniest moments of your life. Where you just look at a friend because someone upstairs, was just all of a sudden playing some song, and you look at one another and you start laughing because you know what that song's a reference to, and that party was insane. And meanwhile, the third person is just like, what just happened?
What?
Yep. I've had so many of those.
Yeah.
They're wonderful.
And that's the thing, is in that moment, we've all been Wax and Wayne, we've all been Maricy, minus the explosion part.
Yeah, thankfully.
Yeah. But that's the secret of this pairing is, hey, they can plan it out in the middle of combat. In addition to actually being really powerful with what they can do, but their ability to come up with a plan on the fly and have the opportunity to communicate and debate it, that's the most powerful thing they have, and that's pretty incredible when you consider some of the feats, especially Wax pulls off.
Oh man.
Another thing I've got to mention about the speed bubbles is when Brandon first came up with the idea, he mentioned redshift to Peter or something, and Peter basically said, you just microwaved everybody in the entire room. And Brandon said, okay, that's just, I'm the author, and I'm going to say it doesn't work that way.
because I need it to work. We're just gonna.
Like, that's literally Brandon saying a wizard did it.
Yeah.
And
Just like having air in the other realm, but I can't.
the
Cognitive.
cognitive.
He's like, there's just air. We don't need to worry about storing air there. There's just air.
Yep.
Because otherwise it doesn't work.
The thing is, the fact that... So, because, as I stated before, I have a physics degree. And so this type of stuff is the stuff that bothers me. Hearing that he actually thought about the redshifting, because if he didn't mention that somewhere, it was going to bug me. And even though his explanation was a wizard did it, which is also known as not an explanation at all, he
acknowledges it.
He acknowledged that, and he thought about it, and the fact that he did that makes people like me happy.
Well, I've said this several times in the rules of grammar. As long as you know the rules you're breaking, you're allowed to break whatever rules you want. Mm-hmm. Just don't break them out of ignorance.
I just need a hand wave. That's all I need. It's all I require. Because if you don't give me a hand wave, it's ice sinking in G.I. Joe movie, and that will piss me off every single time.
Yep. So a lot of the complaints about suspension of disbelief, I think it can actually be boiled down to we're willing to suspend disbelief if we're asked to. If they put us in a situation where we should suspend disbelief and they don't ask us to do it, then we get uncomfortable. But if they ask us to do it, we're like, okay, sure, yeah, I'll do that. That's fine. This
For the sake of the pretty and the plot and, and the cool action, I can do it,
It's like, why doesn't Pacific Rim bother anyone?
It's because it knows what it is.
We know that it's giant robots and giant monsters, and that's what it is.
Don't focus on the structural integrity of a boat and how you can't swing it as a bat.
Watch the pretty robot hit the giant lizard.
And it's great. That's what you're going for.
Rocket elbow.
Elbow rocket, come on.
And the sword. We have a sword.
But seriously, it would not provide enough thrust for it to be useful in any way.
So back to
Scadrial. But it's cool.
So speaking of powerful combinations, so...
Compounding!
Yeah, compound...
Right?
So
let's hold off on compounding. First, we want to just talk about the pairings that Wax and Wayne have.
Before we go into those pairings, I love that Wayne claims he knows all 256 combinations. He knows their names. But there's one thing I love more than that. And I love that there is a spreadsheet that fans have made trying to come up with names for all 256 combinations.
I did not know of this.
I found... I'll have to find it so we can put it in the show notes.
Yeah, we'll definitely put that in somewhere.
There's some really, really fun combinations. My personal favorite is storing luck in a coin shot, and you call it a long shot.
I like it.
I could do that, yeah.
Taking a long shot. I like it.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's a bunch of things like that.
So actually, let's take a step back. So in the first series, we're familiar with mistings. And in this series, he introduces fairings. And I think that's really interesting. Because while Mistborn, while Allomancy has sort of started to be diluted, Feruchemy, over the course of the past 1,000 years, has bred true. If you're a feruchemist, then you can do everything. But at this point, suddenly, once a huge part of the population has been destroyed, everybody's breeding together. Plus, all of the feruchemists have been killed. So there's it's suddenly a recessive gene in the Terrace people, and so while the latent gene is there, and with the interbreeding, you end up with fairings who only have one feruchemical ability. And I think that's a really cool.
Oh, they're flipping it, yeah.
Because Brandon suddenly says, "Okay, here we go," and of course, people who are descended directly from Spook have a much stronger allomantic tie because he is the last
full Mistborn,
full Mistborn, and he is a first generation Mistborn. Because that was the thing, is over the course of generations it would breed out. Mm-hmm. And so there's a lot of allomantic ties in his direct line, which is kind of a cool little touch.
Yeah.
And then we end up with Twinborn.
So there's one thing that I can't find any words of Brandon on this, and so maybe this is just my Google foo is weak.
Okay.
The logic behind there being fairings, there should have been fairings before, by that logic. And that's like, it's just one of these things, because Brandon tends to think these through.
What I'm thinking is maybe because it's basically, it was only the terrace people who had Feruchemy, and it's basically you either have it or you don't, and then they start interbreeding with other races, and I'm guessing maybe like the other races sort of not corrupts or taints, but just diminishes it so that it's not possible for somebody to be
that could
They're
be
not-
a full
they're not a-
Feruchemist.
they're not a
Unless
full-
you're a full-blooded terraceman, you cannot be
okay.
a full Feruchemist.
The other thing, I don't know if I haven't seen anything, but the other thing that came to mind for me is maybe Sazed switched it
He may have.
purposely. 'Cause, I mean, that would make sense for, he's like, no, we're going to tweak it now so nobody can be a full
Well,
Feruchemist
and
anymore.
especially with his full knowledge of what occurred after reading Quan's journal and stuff, and Alendi's journal, I could see him being like, well, this is the culture of my people, I don't want that to go away. But
Right.
he could also see, in a world where he knows there's not going to be any more Mistborn, you can't have full Feruchemists running around. That is going to create a power vacuum. And so
Right.
I could see Sazed being like, I want to preserve this, but I don't want to produce the game-breaking nature of this again.
Yeah.
That might be a question to ask Brandon if we're ever at another signing or something.
True.
Yeah. I'll have to remember.
There's so many questions to ask him.
But Twinborn is such an interesting concept because it plays to what is one of Brandon's most amazing strengths, which is mixing and matching his own systems. And so we saw with Kelsier and Vin, who were very different but very good pushers and pullers. We've seen how good you can manipulate that stuff. But now it all comes back to what Old Man Gemmel told Kelsier. You're not a northern mystic. You can't change your weight. Well, Wax
Now you
can.
But if you could.
And
it's a good thing he can, because he can't pull.
yes,
And so he can't Spider-Man around the city the same way that
push and pull do.
Kelsier.
Yeah.
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 But it's so cool. First of all, just the concept that he walks around at 3/4 weight at all times, just because why not?
That would be nice.
But he
Makes
doesn't
him a
go
little
much
lighter on his
further.
feet.
Yeah, but it doesn't want to go too much further because then he starts moonwalking everywhere. Not the Michael Jackson form, the literal moonwalking, where he's bouncing. And so it doubles as both his way where he stores his weight. And you would think someone who's constantly at 3/4 weight could never run out of weight to store, but then he becomes the weight of a building, and then more and more and more, and actually spends his entire iron mind.
Are you talking about when he's in the
very
house,
end.
or at the very, very end? where
At
he
the very end, yeah.
crushes the building.
That's when he does all of it, and then what is it? Somebody's like, "You are a force of nature."
It was
or
Miles.
something
Miles
crazy.
says that because
That's right.
Miles was using the might makes right fallacy as to why they should rule, and he's just like, why do you follow these people? Don't you see what you could be? And it's like, yeah, he's a destruction force whenever he wants.
Well, I still remember when Brandon was first writing this, he tweeted, I think he wrote this on a plane or something. I might be mixing stories, I can't remember. But he sent out a tweet, he just said, I just wrote my first Allomantic gunfight. And I started salivating. Because I was just like, I want to read this. Because you have the scene where Wax pulls out a revolver, makes himself incredibly heavy, pushes on the bullet as he fires, and basically turns it into a magnum. And just it goes through two people. It's just like, well, that's interesting.
And then you have Renette later on, who's making the special bullets that like are specifically for coin shots, or at least other different, or a pewter arm and stuff. And it's just
And
Haze Killer round.
Haze
The Haze
Killer.
Killer.
What a so
It's a great callback.
For someone who's very gruff and rough around the edges, she's has the soul of the soul of a poet. Because not only does she call these she's a historian, she's clearly a history buff. Mm-hmm. Because not only does she call her bullets haze killer rounds, what does she call her piece de resistance that she gives him? Vindication.
Named after the Ascended Warrior herself.
Oh, yes.
You just read it, you're just like, oh, Renette, you just want to make me love you, don't you? Yes, you do. You're so adorable.
And you're
Brandon,
succeeding.
you just gave me chills. Vindication.
The one thing I wonder about is, in the localizations of this, how on earth do you make that line work in other languages?
Know. That's a good point. I mean, maybe it's just named Vindication, and it's like, this is an English word.
You just have to footnote maybe or something.
Maybe.
If you have anybody who reads in a different language, let us know. Because we don't read the non-English ones.
We need this.
What is Vin's name in French? Because Vin in
French, I think it would still be Vin, wouldn't it?
I mean, it literally means wine, so.
Oh, vino.
Yeah. Anyway. But yeah, Vindication and the Haze Killer rounds.
Well, and this is, once again, goes back to what we'd say about Brandon. He thinks things through. The fact that she comes up with a gun that has... it's for Allomancers only. You either can push or pull to turn the safety on.
And you get the safety, that's right. That's cool.
And just the fact she walks around her house and everything's automated. She has a smartphone or smart home before Alexa's ever invented.
Yep. No, Renette is one of my favorite characters Brandon's created. Mm-hmm. Just because she's so gruff. Oh my gosh, her relationship with Wayne. Poor Wayne is in love with this woman who ain't never gonna love him because he's not her type. But it's just he's so completely oblivious to the fact, and he
tries so hard.
She's just annoyed at him like he's a little puppy who just. But he's the kind of puppy who pees on everything, but it still loves her, and it's just. And I just love the dynamic to the point where she tries to kill him, and he's just like, "Oh, that's just her expressing her affection." Oh, Wayne.
Most of the people couldn't take that kind of punishment, but he can.
Yep.
Isn't that what you always wanted? A friend you could shoot?
It's like she hasn't tried to kill me this month.
Yeah, not this week.
Besides, toes grow back.
You don't need that toe.
Only for Wayne. That's the other thing is she could shoot Wayne. And he'd be fine because he's a bleeder. Is it bleeder?
Blood maker.
Blood maker, yeah.
A blood maker.
We're not to bleeder yet.
No, bleeder's something else. But yeah, he's a blood maker. No. Which I think is another thing that sort of develops Wayne's personality. Because there are certain I can't wait until we talk about some of the other plans that they do in future books. Like not Bat on the Wall, but other ones. Yeah.
Squish Tomato.
Squish Tomato. But that's a later book.
Yeah.
It's been a while since I've read these, and I'm like, oh my goodness.
Speaking of things that are messy, Bloody Tan.
Oh.
Where Brandon suddenly says, I'm going to write a Dan Wells book for the first little bit of this, and have a serial killer who is creepy as all get out, and makes claims like, I've talked to Death, Harmony, and the Survivor, and you're like, he might have.
And notice how he refers to Death.
Yes.
He calls them Iron Eyes.
That's right, yeah.
Who is Iron Eyes?
Oh, yeah.
That's Marsh. That's our buddy Marsh.
Well, and there's
I'd forgotten that Marsh was still
the Survivor.
Around. Yeah, and I love that he's just like, yeah, that's not how my brother would do it. Or he makes a reference, and I'm like, how did I not remember this from last time?
So the thing that I found interesting was Steris had an offhand line talking about sliverism, which was the religion of the wedding party, which they said yeoman, and we know yeoman survived book 3. And so it makes sense that he would be the founder of the religion that still worships the Lord Ruler. But they said, because she's like, oh, grizzly, that's a grizzly religion. Can you imagine worshiping Iron Eyes? I want to know, worship him how? What?
Revere him. Well, and the thing is, he is the last surviving Inquisitor.
Yeah.
The last surviving High Priest of the Lord Ruler.
But it's just one of those things. What? How? Doing what?
What did they do?
Brandon, you wouldn't shut up about religions in the previous books. Could you talk a little bit?
This is a short book. You can do a little bit more. Be okay.
But that's sort of the brilliance of this book. The fact he meant it to be a standalone, and he put just enough breadcrumbs around for you to be convinced, no, he's fully fleshed this out. He knows everything. Meanwhile, you don't see, like, if you tilt the camera 18 degrees, you see it's all an entire prop set that just,
he has fleshed out more than he's shown us.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
He said that specifically.
Because that way you can draw on your story better. And we've talked about that before, that if you have it figured out, then you have a lot more freedom to do what you want with the story.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's so well done. But yeah, so sorry, that was a segue. The bloody tan thing was very interesting, and I want to know, because my theory is he's an adium mist-stain and somehow got a hold of some adium.
It's possible.
I have no
the way
idea
he moved
it's very adium. It was
I don't know.
Very reminiscent of Yeoman versus Vin.
Yep.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you're just like, how would he have gotten adium?
Oh, I do want to make a specific mention of Yeoman, or the leader of House Yeoman. That's where we get our very, very ultimately brief Hoyd cameo.
What?
Is at the wedding.
What? There's a Hoyd cameo and I didn't know about
it. Just mentions
some
that
beggar-looking guy, right?
That Lord Yeoman is speaking to a beggar who is talking very animatedly.
There was,
and right. That was Hoyd.
And where does the attack happen?
Right there. Because Hoyd knows where he needs to be.
He's a wizard.
Does the beggar do anything?
Nope, that's it. That's all it is. He's talking to Lord Yeoman in the background. That's
and the only what I remember mentioned is that there was a beggar that was really irritating. Was it the beggar that was irritating, or there was some other guy that was really irritating? He got invited because it shamed everybody.
That was a different.
That was someone else.
Different one. Okay, that's a different one.
Yeah.
Yeah, it shows how horribly passive-aggressive high society is.
Oh,
yep.
Yeah, that's the way they are.
Even after bringing down the nobles and everything in the Final Empire,
it's just a new group of them.
So.
Kelsier's got to be very disappointed in Sazed as a god, where he's just like,
you couldn't prevent this.
To be fair, it is much better than.
Oh. Yeah.
It was. I mean, it's not a matter of, hey, I can kill somebody on the street and nobody's going to blink.
That's the final argument between Miles and. It's just the fact that one is willing to sit there and acknowledge we have shortcomings, but
we can do better.
But it's better than
like
the absolute. It's progress.
It's
trying.
We're not there. We're not perfect yet, but we're going in that direction.
And the thing that's interesting, because he brings up, you're trying to invoke the survivor's mandate, which is clear that this has been a very long-standing debate, which, if you're from America, this is something that Americans talk about with the Declaration of Independence, which, at what point can you just, decide, what, table flip, we're done with this.
When in the course of human events.
Yeah, and so it's like, this is obvious. I mean, about 1/3 of the population sits there and worships the survivor and the ascendant warrior and all these people that were rebels. And so it makes sense that, people would be like, things aren't working. Maybe we should, overthrow the government. And Wax's whole point is like, guys, it's not great right now, but it's not horrible. Do we want to hit reset? Or could we maybe, work on it?
Yeah, keep working on this one, because if you reset, there's a whole lot of chaos and blood in the meantime.
Yeah, and the other thing that I just love about that is because Wax is not a philosopher. But he ends up in a philosophical debate with Miles at the end because it's getting to the very core of what is a lawman? What are we? Are we tools? Do we have our own free will? At what point do we need to be, going after the people above us? And asking some really tough questions.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And in the end, Wax doesn't know where he stands until the very end.
Mm-hmm.
And the other thing I love about Miles, the fact that he actually cares about his gold allomancy.
Mm-hmm. He actually uses it.
It makes he's not a relatable villain the way a lot of other Brandon's villains have been.
But you can understand him.
Yeah, and he's introspective, and that's interesting.
Do we know if Wax's uncle is an allomancer?
I don't know if we do.
We do, but it gets into later stuff that's kind of
okay. My brain's just connecting dots, but I'm worried that it's going to be more spoilery than it should be.
But yeah,
so
no, but I love that he sits there and says, "Okay, this gold has to be useful for something," and I love that he says, "Allomantic scholars have debated for a very long time. What is it that augurs actually see when they burn their power?"
Yep.
But it's interesting that the other thing is interesting. So Wax is a steel savant, or I've read some people analyze it. Maybe he's not a pure steel savant, but a savant of his Feruchemy, Allomancy.
He's a crasher savant.
Yeah, that because he has the bubble that he puts around him, and he's not quite sure how he does it. But if you read Brandon, that's sort of an effect of burning too much steel. And so, that's interesting. The way he compounds, or Miles compounds, is if you're watching live, I call him Miles T1000 lives, because he gets shot in the face, and it just... Which I'm just like, did you watch Terminator 2 right before you wrote this, Brandon? Because I swear you just watched Terminator 2.
Well, Brandon has said even that if Miles was perfectly cut in half, his spirit would basically randomly choose one half of the body and then just regrow it entirely.
But it makes perfect... The thing that's also interesting is... Because Brandon has talked about how when you compound, you've essentially created a new metal. Because what you're burning to get a ferrochemical effect. Well, the thing that's interesting about that is Miles says he's constantly burning. He doesn't stop. First of all, expensive. You have gold. He's constantly burning gold. But secondly, it's clear that he doesn't stop burning it for anything. He just keeps going. And the fact, he talks about in one of his viewpoints how he's stopped breathing because he heals his body from the lack of oxygen. And he would stop his heartbeat if he could because it gets in the way of shooting. And he's a ferrochemical healing savant, which is only achievable through the fact that he can compound. And it's clear, the fact that he jumps off these buildings and just lands, and you would think, oh, his legs, break and mend themselves.
But they heal so fast that...
Yeah, he's healing so fast that as the microfractures start going, they heal up before they can become actual fractures. And he only has a memory of what pain felt like.
Yeah.
Wasn't there a Bond villain or something who didn't feel pain?
Well, it reminds me of Scarecrow, who doesn't feel fear anymore.
Yeah, because there's something there about a Bond villain, but I don't remember.
Yeah, he has his nerves don't work right or something like that. It's the only other character I can ever think of who doesn't feel pain, and it's just a creepy concept.
Yeah, it's so interesting, and the fact that what's weird is the rest of these books fall as far as villains go. they follow the set and the people who are associated with Wax's uncle.
Mm-hmm.
But this one, he's associated with the set, but even he acknowledges that if he doesn't like how things go, he'll try and bring them down too.
Mm-hmm.
He's a lone wolf.
Yeah.
And he's interesting. We still don't know who Trell is outside of what little bit Sazed told us in the first book.
And the Trell that is described in these books is very different from the Trell that we saw Sazed describe.
Yeah.
So so we don't know even, is it the same Trell or is it just somebody else who's taken the name Trell?
Yeah. But he's a true believer for whatever reason.
To the point where they believe that Metalborn are literally divine.
Yeah.
Mm.
To which
Okay.
It's just it's a complicated subject with Miles and what his philosophy is. And the concept of a lawmaker gone bad. The one thing that I loved that Miles says, he's just like, it's really, like, in Miles' head, it's really a miracle that every lawmaker or lawkeeper doesn't end up breaking bad, because all the times he sat there just thinking, why'd they do it this way? That's not how I would have done it. I would have done it this way. I could have done it better. And don't we all do that at some point? Like, don't we all hear about the drug dealer who got pulled over because his taillight was out? And you're like, I'd be a much better drug dealer. My licenses would always be up. Like, I drive a minivan. I wouldn't fit
like
any
how they
profile.
Brought, what's his name? The gangster. He was in Alcatraz. They brought him down for tax evasion.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, what's his name?
Al
I can't remember.
Capone.
Al
Yes,
Capone.
Capone.
They brought him down for tax evasion of all things, because that's the only way they could catch him. But they caught him on a technicality.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just, but I just love that Miles sits there and recognizes that part of the problem for a lawman is the fact that you sit there with the criminals for so long that you start to think like them.
Yeah, and you have to hunt them down, so you have to learn to think like them to.
And then at that point you realize, I'd be a much better criminal.
Yep.
I would do a much better job than them.
All right. On that note, guys, we need to shut this down. We're going to have another episode because we haven't really talked about the actual plot of this book, really at all.
We haven't talked about Steris and Marasi very much.
No. And so we've got a whole lot more to talk about. I could see this turning into a third episode. Hopefully we can get it all in a second. In just two, though. But we really do need to close now because we've been talking for a while. So, as always, we want to thank our patrons who make it possible for us to keep creating new episodes of the Sandersonian Institute of Cosmere Studies. The show will continue to be free for everybody, but if you want to support us, even with just $1 or $2 each episode, you can go to patreon.com/Cosmere Studies. When you become a patron, you get immediate access to our Discord channel, where we've got a growing community. On Discord, you can continue the discussion about the Cosmere and the show itself. You also get bonus content like the 6-7, a collection of 7 pieces of content we find each week that the hosts want to share with you. You'll also get early access to any bonus content we produce. Speaking of which, we actually just posted a bonus video yesterday. Jordan and I were joined by Dylan, a friend of ours who is also a big fan of board games.
And a patron.
And a patron.
He's a patron, isn't he?
Yeah.
I'm not sure, possibly. And we recorded an unboxing video for the new board games adaptation of Brandon's YA series, The Reckoners. Now, that series may be more familiar to some people as Steelheart, because that was the first book. Now, that video is currently available only to our patrons. And then 1 week from today, that is Monday the 15th, in other words, on Monday, the 22nd of October, it will become available to everybody else. So watch out for announcement on that. Watch our YouTube channel for that update. Now, beyond that, our patrons also automatically will be entered into our giveaways, such as the one we just announced today for the Allomancy coasters.
Oh, yeah.
Just to clarify, those giveaways are not exclusive to our patrons, and they are free to enter, but our patrons will just be entered automatically for one of their 3 entries. And of course, you will help us to continue to make the show and improve the quality of our episodes. As we gain more patrons, we'll be able to record episodes more frequently, and we'll be able to invest in better equipment to improve the audio and video quality for our listeners and viewers alike.
Hopefully equipment that doesn't crash.
Indeed. We apologize for that, but thanks for bearing with us. Now, this week, we have one new patron to thank. That is Bentley S. Thank you so much for your generosity. It's because of your donations that we're able to keep putting out new episodes. Of course, outside of the Sandersonian Institute of Cosmere Studies, we each have our own personal product or projects that we're working on. So, Amy, when we're not recording, where can we find you outside of the podcast?
I am on most social media sites. I do play things like Halosphere. It's like 5 feet long. Actually, it's like 5'4" because I'm 5'3" and it's taller than me. Anyway, but I'm on Facebook as Coincidence Cosplay and Props, on Instagram as Coincidence_cosplay, and on Twitter as Coincidence Cosp because it's too long. And now that I have the spear done, I may make this more yellow. I'm not sure. I have to figure out how to do that. But
age it or
age it, yeah, because I mean it's sort of dirty, but it's not dirty enough.
You have children. It shouldn't be hard to get them to dirty things up.
Yeah, it's only getting them to keep it in one spot.
Oh.
That's the hard part, yeah. Contain dirty.
I say just like leave it out in the rain or something.
That would ruin everything else, no. But what so I'm making Halloween costumes for my kids right now. But once that is done, I will start working on my Nazgul. This is a ring wraith, if you don't know what that is. So it's going to be awesome. So yeah, so that's my current projects.
And Jordan, how about you?
As always, you can find me on twitch.tv/splicestream. It's like ice cream, but splice stream. It's an amazing comparison. I'm going to be streaming more Amiibo content Tuesday and Wednesday, and Saturday is when fans of this show definitely should tune in, because that's when I have my Saturday Morning Smash, which has nostalgic commercials, and we have some doozies this Saturday, which starts at 9 a.m. Pacific, noon Eastern, and then on top of it, I'm now going to be mixing in a new game every other week, and maybe at the end of other streams if they go incredibly quick. I've been introduced to the Jackbox Party Pack, which allows for viewers to participate in the game. If you've never played, it's the same people who did the games You Don't Know Jack.
Way back when.
Yeah, way back when. They're incredibly fun games. Games like Quiplash, which people compete to try and come up with the best quip for a certain prompt. And I will be starting those every Monday that we don't stream the podcast. We're going to be doing those games, and those will be at my normal streaming time of 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern. You can hear me do math in my head verbally. It's awesome.
Yeah, those games are funny and incredibly irreverent, just to give fair warning. But
yeah. Oh, and one more time before we go, how do people enter the contest if they're not our patrons?
You can go to our Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram pages. We're going to be putting up a post either tonight or tomorrow, and it'll announce the giveaway itself in the post. And what you do is you'll want to tag another person, and that will enter you into the giveaway, and we'll send you 2 coasters, a match set of, this time it's going to be pewter and tin, and you keep one and you give the other to the person that you tag. So, yeah. As for my... What?
I just said yep.
Oh.
Good.
As for myself, when I am not here, I am writing board game reviews over at the Innkeeper's Table at www.innkeeperstable.com. It's been way too long since I've actually published a review, so hopefully I'll get a new one written soon. I really want to get a review of The Reckoners out pretty quickly, because we played it last weekend after the unboxing, and it was just a lot of fun.
It's
a really good adaptation.
Very well designed, and if you're a fan of the Steelheart series, you're going to see the fingerprints of that story all over the game. If you like a good adaptation, this is a very good one, including one villain who is just Brandon Sanderson.
It's a great little cameo. His name is Quicksand.
Quicksand.
Ooh.
And you see the picture, it's like, that's just Brandon. And on top of it, everyone has a case file name, case file number for Quicksand, 16.
Nice.
And Quicksand is stationed outside of Lincoln, Nebraska, which is where Brandon is from. Anyway, so to keep an eye out for my reviews, you can follow me on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. All of those are at Innkeeper's Table. If you've enjoyed the show, we would love it if you would go over to iTunes and give us a 5-star review. It really makes a big difference in helping other people find us and bringing in new listeners to the show. Next to becoming a patron, it's actually the best way you can support us. And of course, be sure to share the show with other Brandon Sanderson fans you know, such as maybe the person you tag entering our giveaway. How many times can we say giveaway tonight?
I mean, we could just shoehorn a few more in if you'd like.
Anyway, so before we close the episode, Amy and Jordan, do y'all have any final thoughts about anything we've talked about tonight? We've got another episode, so you know there's still more we could talk about. But if you have anything to add to what we've talked about tonight, that would be pertinent.
I really liked your quote from last time, Bill, when we were talking about how we were going to talk about Mistborn as cowboys. That made me really happy. They're cosplaying as cowboys.
That's exactly what's happening.
And the other quick thing is I always think of Wax as wearing a cowboy hat, but he wears a bowler hat. And like it just never meshes in my head right.
That was one thing that was interesting is Allendale feels like it's like a mashup of industrial London and New York together. Mm-hmm. Because they're going out into the roughs, which is essentially the American frontier.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of Britain in there.
Oh, yeah.
My final thought, I'm actually going to steal from someone from the Reddit Cosmere subreddit. That wasn't a sentence. That wasn't even close. The Cosmere subreddit, the user Necrotic Touch posted an observation that I had not caught. If you look at a map of Ellendale, it is the allomantic and the feruchemical charts overlaid one another. And go look at it. If you haven't read the thread, the title of the thread was something about you're gonna have to pull that way back. There we go. That's much better. If you can't see it on the stream because you're not watching it, just go look up a map of Ellendale, and now that it's pointed out, you're gonna see it, and you're just gonna be like, I never saw it before. So shout out to Necrotic Touch for noticing that and blowing my mind.
Yep, it's pretty great. So, and I love, again, the idea of this, what was the term that he used? Not legacy, but it was just like multiple eras. It's not a serial. There was a term that Brandon used that he said he always planned it to be, looking at the same world in multiple different eras and seeing how time progresses. And I just think that's a really cool concept, and I love that we ended up accidentally getting an additional era in the Mistborn world because
it's so fun.
Mistborn's just awesome.
Well, and it's an amazing, but just because I feel like this era fits so well. Because jumping from old to 1980, I think would have felt that would have been really jarring to not see the in between.
So Brandon has said he does still intend to have some additional short stories in other eras. One of the ones he said was 1940s, and I'm just like, oh, Brandon.
World War II era, huh?
Mm-hmm. I think at one point he was also talking, this might be something I made up in my head and really, really want, or it might be something he actually said he was going to do, but like gangsters. And I'm just like, I want Mistborn Bugsy Malone.
Well, Bill, I believe you. But my Tommy gun don't.
There's always another secret, you filthy animal. Anyway, okay. So, if you have questions or feedback for us, we would love to hear it. Let us know what you think of the show and what your favorite moments from the Cosmere have been. What topics have you been dying to know more about? Was there something about one of the books that we've already discussed that you wish we talked about more? Is there something in today's book that you want to make sure that we don't leave out during the next episode? What Cosmere theories are keeping you up at night? You can email us at cosmerestudies@gmail.com. We just might read and discuss your email during one of our episodes. In addition to the live episodes of the show that stream on twitch.tv/Innkeeper's Table every 2 weeks on Monday nights at 7:30 p.m. Pacific Time, 10:30 p.m. Eastern, listeners can find our videos on YouTube or the audio versions of the podcast on iTunes, Spotify, and just about any other service that carries podcasts by searching for Cosmere Studies. You can also follow us and contact us through Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook under the profile @Cosmere Studies. That's all we've got for this week's episode of the Sandersonian Institute of Cosmere Studies, but in 2 weeks, on October 29th, we'll be back to finish up our discussion of Alloy of Law. In the meantime, on behalf of Amy, Jordan, and myself, thanks for listening, and remember,
There's always another secret. Nailed it! First try! Boom!
Can we do that again so I can fix the audio?
Sure.
I don't know. That was pretty good.
In the meantime, on behalf of Amy, Jordan, and myself, thanks for listening, and remember,
There's always another
secret.
secret.
Should I just do it myself again?
No, this is perfect.
Just one more time.
Okay.
In the meantime, on behalf of Amy, Jordan, and myself, thanks for listening, and remember,
There's always another
secret.
secret.
We need speed bubbles to plan this crap out.
Wow.
That's called a callback, folks.
Nailed it.
Boom. First try.